Thank you so much, Brenda, for presenting our second session of HR Essentials for employers. And yeah, you can go ahead and start with your presentation.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about hiring and keeping the right people. And we all know that it's a really tricky situation in the market right now where it's difficult to find people. But then how are we retaining them, and how are we making sure that they're really getting the most out of the employee and employer relationship? So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I'll just share my presentation here. And give me a quick second and I'll share my screen. And then, okay. So can you see that all right, Chantel?
Yes, yeah, that looks good.
Perfect. So today we're going to be talking about finding the best talent and retaining them. So really talking about how to attract and align that talent through value-based job postings. We really want to make sure that those job postings are attracting the right people. We want to make sure that we're compliant and we have inclusive interviewing practices. We want to make sure that we have effective onboarding and that it actually retains and engages people. And then we're going to really touch on what's called the employee value proposition through a strategic lens. So one of the things that I would like to talk about is how many people are actually incorporating their values into the recruitment and onboarding practice. And what I found is through various organizations, many people don't actually incorporate that into their hiring practices. So what does that actually look like? We'll talk about that a little bit and how to add that. And so when we talk about culture and values alignment, did you know that 77% of candidates consider an organization's culture before even applying for a job? And 73% of those prioritize values before applying. So what that actually means is that they're going online, they're looking to see what your values are as an organization and determining whether or not those values align with them personally. So if we can demonstrate that someone has a stronger alignment, they may be more likely to apply, and they're going to have a higher rate of job satisfaction, engagement, and productivity. So they're going to actually be happier. They're going to possibly stay longer, and they're going to be your greatest cheerleader when it comes to coming out of the organization, and potentially when they do leave, they're going to promote you. So when we talk about what does that cultural fit mean, we want to make sure that people understand what behaviors you are willing to tolerate and what you're not willing to tolerate. And so what your company's norms and practices are all about are really important to demonstrate on that website. So when you express who you are and what you're all about on your company website, that's going to be really valuable to attracting the right people. When we talk about that value-based recruitment, we want to make sure that do my values align with the company's? Does the company support any social causes that are important to me? So, for example, I may be really passionate about helping a certain type of organization of a nonprofit or something like that. Does the company actually support those types of things as well? If I'm really concerned about the environment, do they demonstrate that as well? Are there team activities after hours? So think about if the company does do these types of things, are they actually promoting that? Are they talking about that? Have some clients who have like pickleball teams and things like that within their peer groups. And I think that's a really great thing to be able to demonstrate to your staff or to the potential staff that these are the things that you value the most. And so, and this is how you can get your team to work together. So promoting those things are really important. And if you have growth and development opportunities, are they really important to me? And does the company actually offer that? So again, when you look at that, if that's really important to me as a value, the company, if they demonstrate that they have learning and development opportunities and they demonstrate that, that's going to really affect my ability and the potential for me to go in and apply for that position. And if the company offers anything that's above and beyond regular compensation, are you actually celebrating this? So, for example, you might have bonuses, you might have perks that you offer to your staff, and those types of perks and those benefits are really important to talk about. You might offer, let's just say your benefits are 100% employer paid. That's a huge perk. Not many companies will offer that. And how many offer that to share with others so that they understand what they're offering and make it attractive to somebody? So you wonder, how does this actually work? So how can you do this? Well, you're going to open your job posting with a really compelling narrative or a scenario that immediately connects the person with the core values of the company. You're going to frame it so that the candidate is the hero. They're going to be the one to solve your problems or challenge or rise to the occasion to bring their unique skills and their value to the company. You want to be authentic, using your language to show the human side of the company, to demonstrate how you're going to make a connection with the people in itself. Then you're going to write a clear, you're going to describe not only what the job entails, but why it matters and how it contributes to the core purpose. And you're going to use inclusive language. So you're not going to use jargon or anything that is gender related. You're going to encourage people from all backgrounds and experiences to apply, even if they haven't had experience in that specific field. And that's really important to understand is that it's interesting to see if you say you must have X number of years experience, someone and majority of women, if they see that, will not apply if they don't specifically have that exact experience. So instead of saying must have, this might be a nice to have, maybe required, something like that, so that you are more inclusive, so that you're encouraging more people to apply. You're going to want to make sure that you emphasize what makes you unique and what kind of benefits you have, learning opportunities, giving back to the community, your team activities, and how you all help each other. And then you're going to end it with a call to action. So it encourages the candidate to apply, making the process very clear and very welcoming. So when we look at all of this and we compile it into one little area, a good example might be, what if your work actually helped build a greener, more connected world where your skills don't just meet job specs, but really shaped solutions for tomorrow? At Green Matcha Solutions, we believe in the power of possibility. Whether you're partnering with communities to reduce environmental impact or support smaller businesses with sustainable innovations, we're fueled by our values of integrity, collaboration, and purpose. We're not here just to solve problems. We're inviting people like you to be a part of the solution. So it's compelling, it's intriguing people to draw them in and find what it is that gives them purpose and the company purpose. You also want to make sure that you have compliant and inclusive hiring practices. So when we talk about inclusive language, we want to make sure that we use words like salesperson versus a salesman. Or we're going to also highlight the diversity. So we're going to include statements in job postings that express your organization's dedication to diversity and inclusion and encourages candidates from all backgrounds to apply. And you may also want to look at different areas where you're going to post. So you might advertise your job openings on different platforms and organizations to reach underrepresented groups. You're also going to think about when we talk about the diversity side of it is your hiring panel. So do you have a diverse hiring panel that actually reflects the different departments, the different backgrounds, or employee levels? And you're going to want to make sure that there are personal touch points throughout the entire hiring process. So if a candidate understands what they are going to expect during an interview process, this is going to make them feel a lot more prepared, more comfortable, and more included. So, for example, if somebody were to need an accommodation, one of the things that you can do to make sure that you have an inclusive hiring practice is to ask the candidate if they need an accommodation. Provide detailed interview instructions in advance. So, who they'll be meeting, how long it's going to be, the types of questions to expect. So, for example, if you're going to use behavioral-based interview questions, explain what that means. Share the interview questions or themes ahead of time. If the person has requested an accommodation, this is going to really be important for those types of situations. And I know this goes against what we're typically used to of you ask questions and the reason why is because you want to find out if the person can think on their feet and things like that. But then there's also times where people are not good in those situations where they're not really great at being able to just automatically think on their feet. They want to be prepared. And so this is going to reduce some of that anxiety and have them prepared and show up the best that they can be. You also may want to offer alternatives to traditional interviews. So you may want to, if someone needs to have a Zoom interview or something else that is not your traditional in-person meeting, they may be more comfortable, say, in a setting where it's a smaller group, and it's not a huge panel. You also may want to look at how your communication style happens throughout that process. So during the interview, you may want to be a little bit more patient with slower verbal responses. If somebody's taking their time to answer something, have that patience. Accept direct to the point answers. Offer the option for breaks if it's a long process. So if somebody's taking, a 2-hour interview or an hour interview and they're finding it's just overwhelming, ask them if they need breaks. Another thing might be to avoid loud or overstimulating environments for people and allow for visual aids or written questions to help people as well. And that would also be really helpful. And if somebody needs any assistance with technology or extra time or different types of formatting, make sure you use plain, clear language that is specific about the essential skills versus the nice to haves. Make sure that you state the accommodations are welcome and that you offer flexible application formats. So again, when you think about those accommodations, allowing the applicant to apply via video or a written statement or a resume all depends on their type of preference and their ability to apply. So again, those are the types of accommodations that you want to make or potentially make depending on the situation that you are interviewing for. You want to make sure that you have a standardized interview process. So making sure that you implement a structured process that's consistent and asking every candidate the same question and all of the candidates the same questions. You don't want to have those biases otherwise. You want to make sure that you have bias training as well. So your hiring managers and your interviewers recognize and mitigate some of those biases that they potentially could have, and they don't even know it. We want to focus on the essential qualifications. And then, so for example, focus on the person's ability to do the job, not perform in a traditional interview setting, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be great at the interview process, but can they actually do the qualifications that you require? And offer constructive feedback. So it really helps people understand where they can improve and grow if you can be honest at the end of the conversation or the interview process. If they're not successful, why? And then communicate clearly and kindly. Avoid vague rejection letters and make sure that you contact the person directly via phone or connecting that way so that they can actually have a respectful communication from you. You know, getting the letter or email saying, unfortunately, you were an unsuccessful candidate is probably one of the worst feelings that people can have. They've taken the time out of their day to come and spend some time with you. So you should have the respect back to them to let them know that, you know, they weren't successful in that process. So what are some of the things that you can and cannot ask? Well, what's okay to ask is, are you legally eligible to work in Alberta? What's not okay is, what year were you born or where did you grow up? Where are you originally from? Those are not okay to ask. This position requires work from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Are you available to work these hours? On the flip side, you can't ask, like, do you have children? Are you married? Are you planning on having kids? So do you see how it's about the hours of work, but are the situations that might affect those hours? That's not okay to ask. It's okay to ask if this job requires lifting of up to 50 pounds. Are you able to perform this with or without accommodation? But it's not okay to say, do you have any physical disabilities that would prevent you from doing this job? That would be discriminatory. And another example would be, what education or certificates do you hold that are relevant to this position? It's not okay to ask, what year did you graduate and where did you graduate from in Canada? Or what year did you graduate from or where did you graduate from to try to get to determine where their place of origin was. Those would be discriminatory. So as you can see, there's a few examples. These are not obviously all of the examples, but we want to make sure that we are complying with Alberta human rights and making sure that we do not ask anything related to the areas of protected grounds. Hopefully those were good examples to demonstrate some of those different things. So what are some of the common biases that we have that sometimes we might not even be aware of? We have what's called an affinity bias. So they remind me of me. It's a tendency to favor candidates that share similar interests or backgrounds, education, or personality traits that I may have. So the impact may be that we tend to hire people that are like us or likability over their actual qualifications. Another bias that we sometimes have is what's called the halo effect. They can give us a great answer at the very beginning, and then all of a sudden we think that they're amazing all around. We're not listening to all of the answers. We've just automatically put them into the they're great category. So what will happen is that there's an overemphasis on one positive trait while ignoring the weaker areas, and it could inflate over-evaluation of the individual. There's also the horns effect. So they stumbled on the first question, so you automatically think, oh, well, they're not going to be doing well on this at all. And then you automatically go from the halo effect to the whole different area. So they're not good. And you've made that decision right from the very beginning, right? It's not going to go well. So it's one negative impression skews the entire interview process. And a potentially strong candidate could be overlooked because of that bias. Then we sometimes have what's called a confirmation bias as well. I had a gut feeling where that didn't feel right or that didn't seem right, and now I'm only seeing the proof of that. So you're looking for information that confirms your initial belief, and you're ignoring anything that might contradict that initial thought. So that reinforces assumptions, but not actual facts. And another bias would be the anchoring bias. So their resume was just okay, so I wasn't expecting too much. So again, letting the first piece of information over influence your assessment. And you will typically have under or over evaluation of candidates based on pre-interview impressions. We may also have similarity biases. Well, we went to the same university, so that's a really good sign. So very similar to the other bias in the past. So it's preferring people who look, sound, or act like you, or come from very familiar institutions to you. That will also limit diversity, just by the way. Gender or racial bias is there as well. So this is our unconscious assumption about people based on their race, gender, accent, or appearance. And that is going to lead to systemic inequity and discrimination. Another bias is called the attribution bias. They look like they've been looking for a job. It's been a very long time, so they must not be a good performer. So you're assuming outcomes are due to personal traits rather than external factors. So it penalizes the person for circumstances you don't know and you may not be aware of. So for example, if there's a gap in the resume, and you're unaware of why that gap was there, then you may say, okay, well, I'm not going to qualify them or bring them in for an interview because they've been off work for 2 years. But little do we know that during those 2 years, they were off for caregiver responsibilities or something like that. And then we have what's called a recency bias. So the last candidate I saw was amazing. Now everyone else seems like they're weaker. So we're giving undue weight to the most recent interviewee, and it skews the fairness in the evaluation. So how can we reduce the biases in these interview processes? Well, we can have structured interviews, meaning that we're going to ask the same questions for everyone. We're going to make sure that we have a scoring system so that we have clear definitions of what excellent looks like. We're going to have, again, the same questions for each person. We're going to make sure that our biases are put aside so everybody understands what that looks like, um, and how to mitigate those biases. We're also going to make sure that there's going to be more than one person in the interview and that there's various backgrounds and experience. So we don't want to have people that are the same in the interview process. So cross-functional team members, as well as making sure that we have gender representation or cultural representation on the panels when possible as well. And we may also want to remove identifying information. And what that means is sometimes we can have a bias if we see a name that we feel could be, if we know somebody could potentially be discriminatory based on that. So if we eliminate that and we're actually looking at, the actual qualifications of the candidate, that's going to eliminate some of that bias for those interview processes. And when we score immediately throughout the interview process, that eliminates our ability to go back and say, well, here's our bias on this person versus the other person. So we're going to eliminate that as well. And you may want to include some simulations or tests. So for example, if you say, I want somebody to have, exceptional Excel spreadsheet experience, providing them with a little bit of a test at the end of the interview process may be very beneficial so that they can actually demonstrate their skills and abilities for you. And then audit your process. And this is really important. Just because you've set a process in place, don't set it and forget it. Make sure that you review this on a regular basis and maybe determine whether or not, your interview questions need to be updated. Does your panel need to be adjusted? Does your scoring system maybe need to be updated? And if you see something that's not working, make sure you change it. So the next thing that we're gonna do is talk about effective onboarding. And what does that actually mean? A lot of organizations will think that onboarding is just when somebody starts or with the company. But in reality, great companies will ensure that their onboarding starts before day one with the company. So the employee may receive a personalized welcome package. It might be swag, it might be a handwritten welcome card, it might be a team photo. They may be able to access the team portal right away. They might have a welcome message from the CEO. And when they come in, um, everything is set up. They're fully set up for day one for success. So their computer, their desk, everything is put and set up for success for that person, because otherwise when they come in and you're scrambling and their desk isn't available, that makes the person feel like they weren't as important as they should be. So if you actually have all of that ready, and you have all of that, that's going to show that you're prepared, that the person matters, and that their contributions, they can start contributing from day one. So just like in your recruitment process, you're going to really get into your why the company does business, the core values, the testimonials from employees. You're going to want to make sure that you dive deep into this, into the actual orientation of day one. You may want to have a new hiring buddy system. So the person gets assigned to somebody so that they can ask all the questions that they may have that sometimes we're too embarrassed to ask or we're uncomfortable to ask. You know, I sometimes don't even know where the bathroom is if you don't show me. Um, or I don't know who to ask about something else. Like, for example, if there's a team lunch, am I invited? I don't know. So this is also a way of them forming a really good relationship with someone within the company, that's going to also make them feel a little bit more comfortable. You also want to create a visual so that people know what to expect within their 30, 60, and 90 days. And you want to really celebrate those early wins, meaning assign those really small things and those small tasks that allow them to contribute and be successful. So making sure to provide feedback and celebrate those wins are really important. The other thing that you want to do is when someone starts, to make sure that they know who is who in the company and what everyone's purpose and role is so that they can understand the big picture. So if they understand that, they're also going to know who to ask the right questions to and who to go to for company expertise. And if your company does team activities, make sure to share that and what those are. These include the fun things that you might do together to create a team atmosphere, a sense of belonging, but they also demonstrate an important thing that, you know, these are the things that you do for the community and highlight those social impacts as well. And make sure that your leaders are visible and accessible. So I remember I had a president of the company one day come up and say, "Good morning, Brenda." And that shocked me. And it made me feel so important that the important thing to know is that when people can do that, you feel like you belong quicker, and you feel like this is a place that I can call home for a long period of time. So make your leaders visible, accessible, and that they're not high up there where they're untouchable, but they're part of the team. They're just like everyone else. And that's really important to create that inclusive environment. So our second month might be that you're going to set some goals now. You're going to align them with the personal goals that they have, as well as professional goals. You're also going to want to have one-to-one meetings with the person every few weeks. So that's within your second month, but you should always be doing this. Having those one-to-one meetings is super important so that people feel heard, validated, and that they're contributing to the bigger picture. Um, One of the things that people often do is that, oh, I have a new hire. We have our performance review in the next, year. So that's when we're going to have those discussions. Well, people will do the best that they can and truly try to contribute the most that they can to work But if they're never told that they're doing it wrong, they're going to continue to probably do it wrong or incorrectly. So it's really important to have those one-on-ones, celebrating the early successes, celebrating things that are going well, but then also having those conversations about where do you see improvements and how can they um, do things in a different manner to be able to be successful. Check in with the buddy regularly. So if you've assigned a buddy to the system, make sure that that person is also providing you with regular feedback because then you know how successful that person's being. Maybe they're, having some struggles that you're not aware of. So the buddy can also provide you with that guidance. And determine those learning and development opportunities early on. So if the person has some professional goals and you want them to achieve that, let's talk about what those opportunities can look like and make sure that we have that set up so that we know that you can be successful in the long run. And then you also want to have a documented review after 90 days. So what within that 90 days, it's actually documented. You're all one-to-one meetings. I always say in HR, you should always have everything documented. Just briefly have a journal and write everything that you need down. What's going well, what's not going well. But then when you have that review, you can eliminate those recency biases because you have documentation of that. And make sure that you solicit feedback on you as a manager. So what can I do differently? Or what can I do to help you succeed? And what can we as an organization do differently? Because the people that are coming into the organization see things that we don't sometimes see. And so asking for the person's feedback and their input will also open up that communication and that trust as well. So it sets you up for success, sets everyone up for success when you start early on. And then when we move into month 3 to 6, it's more of the same. But we're going to also allow for a little bit more autonomy. We're going to make sure that we set those stretch goals. So now we're really looking at what can we do to make sure that you're really successful, but we're going to stretch you a little bit more. And we're going to recognize and reward your initiatives or learnings and your mistakes. So it shouldn't be punitive. When mistakes happen, let's talk about the learnings and how do we actually develop processes or procedures or things that put in place so that everyone can learn from those things. And it's not just about a hand slap. It's not that you've done wrong. It may be because no one ever taught you how to do it. You may have done something incorrectly or the process wasn't correct. So let's recognize and look at that as a learning opportunity. It's not saying that you celebrate it for saying, yay, you've done a good or a bad thing or a bad job. What it's saying is, I'm glad that we've learned that this has come to our attention so that we can correct it. You may also want to introduce key performance indicators. So if you actually have metrics that someone needs to achieve that are realistic, and that they can then achieve and work towards, this is a good time to do that because they're going to be more familiar with the role, they're going to be more comfortable, they're going to understand what is expected of them, and now they can meet those expectations. And it holds people accountable. And then again, you're going to solicit feedback on you and the company. And I'm always going to say, never stop soliciting and giving feedback. That's probably one of the most important things is we need to ensure that we're doing a good job as leaders. And we need to also understand that people need to hear and feel that they're doing well, that they're contributing to the organization, that they're contributing to the purpose, what they're doing matters, and how does it all tie back to the company. So it comes back to making a good first impression, right? So this is an interesting statistic, is that 29% of new hires decide within the first week if they're going to stay with a company. So if your first week, if we talk about thinking about that, if I've shown up my desk isn't prepared. I don't have an orientation, or my orientation means just sitting in front of a computer and I'm left alone. No one takes me for lunch or asks me to sit with them during lunch, and I'm not sure where to go, what to do. That may influence my decision if I want to be a part of this team. So these are little things that are important that may not be important to you, but may be important to others. 44 days is the average time it takes for a new hire to decide whether or not they're going to stay long term. So you have a little bit over a month to make a really great first impression. An 82% higher retention with a structured onboarding process. So if you actually spend the time to have a really robust onboarding process where you're making people feel included, that they understand the expectations, that they know what to do and how to do it, you're going to have a higher retention rate because of that. And you're 18 times more likely to feel committed after a positive onboarding experience. So I'm going to be really committed to the company if I feel that the company's put in a really good hard effort to make a really great first impression and make me feel welcome. So when we talk about an employee value proposition, most of us have heard of a value proposition. We're going to turn it into the employee value proposition. We're going to say, okay, what does that actually mean? Well, do our new hires align with our values? Are we building diversity into every pipeline stage? Meaning that when it comes to the actual recruitment process, when we're posting a job, when we interview, when we bring them on board, and when they're throughout the entire life cycle, are we making sure that we have diversity and inclusion throughout the processes? Are we reducing time to productivity? Meaning that if we have a really good process in place for onboarding, that person's going to be a lot more productive really quickly. And are we developing plans as part of our onboarding? So, meaning that if we know how to make sure that someone's going to be successful and we have a plan in place for the next 3 to 6 months, showing them how they're going to be fully trained and developed and competent in their role, that is really important to making sure that you have a strong EVP. And our candidates and employees experiencing inclusion, growth, and joy. And that's really important when it comes to making sure people feel valued, heard, and contributing to the bigger picture. And so I wanted to thank you very much for joining me and Chantel during this presentation. And I hope that you've learned something and that the information was valuable to you.
Thank you so much, Brenda, for your presentation. That was lovely. I know that I definitely have a lot of notes that I was taking down as you were sharing your knowledge and your experience here. Yeah, so we thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you very much. Take care.